We sort of went on a bit of a journey and we made a few mistakes that didn't have any consequences where we went to make a vision statement and we realized it was a purpose statement and just kind of getting clarity in those things. And I just had the thought before we started is why have a vision, work out your mission, purpose in terms of writing a statement and being clear with it with your people. And the two main reasons would be it keeps us direct and it keeps us focused because really every sort of organization tends to go towards being complicated, and complications make things sort of busy and low productivity. Uh, so that's important, but probably for me, the more important thing is it allows you to take people with you because you're clear. This statement, which takes a while to get your head around, called longer and stronger rather than taller and pointier. So if you think about what ministry you're in, you really want to involve as many people as you can, taking responsibility and making things longer, making people stronger. So it's not all reliant on the one excellent leader at the top who, and we've seen that work with really excellent people, but when it goes bad, it really goes bad. And I just don't think it's a very biblical model to say how tall can we make our organizational structures and how dependent on the really charismatic person. So I found it's been a great tool for taking people with us and providing a space where we can trust people because they understand the vision, mission, culture, and so they make right cultural decisions. The other thing I thought was people in your church, in your youth group, in your sphere of influence, people respond well when we're vulnerable, when we tell them, this is what I'm believing for. This is what God's put on my heart. This is what I think. This is what I'm aiming for. It makes us feel vulnerable because we're kind of like, hey, this is what I'm believing for. And if it doesn't happen, I don't. But if they're your people and you aim for something and you don't quite get there, they should go with you anyway. They should just be, we'll just have another go. But the reason I came to this conclusion, and I'm going to say some stories from our church, doesn't mean our church is perfect. It just this is my frame of reference, right? So we were buying a building, and the bank needed us to raise $100,000 in 3 weeks. And for our church at that size at that time, especially, was a lot. It's a lot now, but it was really a lot then. And I just felt this wave of people being with us. And I realized it's because we said, we want this building, we want to grow, we want to reach people, and we are expecting this amount of money to come in. And so, because the vision and was so well cast, now the money was going to come in or it wasn't. It wasn't, you know. So for us, it felt really like we could look like we fail. And that tension of showing people in your inner, especially the people you want to go with you, showing them I'm believing for something, I'm aiming at something, and I'm believing God has spoken to me about something, does make you feel a bit uncomfortable and a bit insecure, but people need that and respond to it. And it deals with stuff in you, but I think that people really respond to that. So looking at that, if we look at defining the four things we're going to look at tonight, the first one is your mission or the mission of the ministry you're involved in. And I think people here, it's mainly youth. So the mission is the overall objective of what you do, and this is what all of your team needs to embody. This is the atmosphere around what you do. This is the calling and the reason that the ministry started is your mission. And we'll go into that in a second. The second one is purpose, and purpose is usually 3 or 4 points that convey what you find most important about your mission. And this is what you want everybody to know. So all of your youth kids eventually should be able to know your purpose. So your mission is why you do what you do, and your purpose is that sort of boiled down into a few quick ideas that people can grab onto, even if they're on the peripheral of what you do. The culture is the sets of values that lead to subconscious behaviors. So this is how your organization feels. We're going to spend more time on this, I understand. I just wanted to clarify them. So your culture is like they're the deep-seated values that you have, and what they make are subconscious behaviors. People in certain groups behave certain ways. Certain sports fans, certain churches, certain workplaces have culture. So if in a workplace, if the culture is gossip, then everyone tends to get on board eventually because that's the overall so we have to be intentional with our culture, and we're going to talk about that. And the fourth one is vision. And everybody places a lot of emphasis on vision, but a vision is essentially it's the easiest one. And it's also the one that changes the most. The top three, the culture values may change, but essentially your mission and your purpose, that's why you start, that's what you're doing. Um, I won't go too much into we're about to, but it's like those things don't change. It's what God's been putting on your heart as the leader of the ministry over a prolonged period of time. It's the thing that you're passionate about. It's the reason that you got into ministry is your mission. And your vision is just what you're aiming for now. Might be to a certain get us to see a certain amount of kids get saved. It might be to have a ministry at a certain frequency, but you will eventually achieve your vision, and then you'll set another one. So the vision changes, but the mission and the purpose don't change. And so that's why vision we're going to spend the least amount of time on, because it's just something for you to take away and just try and clarify in a few sentences what you're aiming for at this point. Because if you're not aiming for something, you're just gonna. The Bible says, without vision, we cast off restraint. You start to lose direction if you're not aiming for something. So it's really important. But so mission and purpose. Why did the ministry start? And what is the calling? If we define why, then everything you can, sorry, just juggle reading my own notes. I'll go back to these ones. Define why, then do everything you can to make sure it doesn't get complicated. Stick to your calling. Use your core purpose to constrain your activity to that purpose. Like I said, everything tends to get really complicated as things start to grow. And having a core mission that is understandable and definable, or having a purpose statement that whenever you start to grow or time goes in an organization, we start adding things in. And some of those things that are in your churches or in your ministries aren't in mine, but it doesn't mean they're bad. It just means they're a slightly different expression of the mission of the church. It's your expression. And having a sense of what your purpose is stops you getting complicated. Um, so is what we do in line with our purpose? Is everything I'm doing in line with what the purpose of what I set out to be? And I think that as leaders, you need to sort of come back to that often and go, do we need to lose some things we're doing because we've allowed it to get more complicated, or because we've achieved that vision and now that we're doing it, we need to move on. Um, and sometimes if we're not defined our purpose, we end up doing things that don't serve our mission. So people are inspired by having purpose, but they will work hard towards a vision. So that's where those two things differentiate. So the purpose and your mission will actually inspire your team. It is like, say you say, oh, we want to have a youth group that has, I don't know, 30 kids come per every week. If you keep on saying we're going to have 30 kids coming every week, we're going to have that's your vision. If you keep repeating that, it starts to sound a little bit cliche. Whereas if your purpose is we want to reach kids in our community and we're doing everything that we do so that kids know Jesus and that they find a purpose for their life, and you start to outline your purpose, then your team start going towards your purpose. So you inspire people with your purpose. And that's how you get people moving along to the goal with you. It's some people will be loyal to you as a person, and that's nice. But then when people see a purpose, even if they don't like you, they'll get on board. Does that make sense? It makes it less um, personality focused. And really, if we have a clear mission and really a clear purpose, then people will move along with us, even if they disagree with some of the ways, because you're never going to do everything that everybody likes. You're going to have to make decisions in your ministry that are not always popular with everybody, because there's just no way that you can keep everybody happy all the time. However, if it's heading towards a purpose, people tend to get on board and keep going. So everybody should know the purpose, and this will communicate your mission. So I just want to, these notes have kind of got big language, but going back to the start, if your purpose is like your mission kind of constrained to a few sentences, all of the complexity and all of the nuance of everything you feel passionate about can't be conveyed to the amount of people you need to come along with you. The more people are with you, the more they're going to understand the greater mission that you're involved in. But really, God speaking to you over the decades of your life can't be communicated to everybody very quickly. And there's going to be a lot more in you than you can give everybody. So I would say that your mission you give to people in team meetings all the time. You constantly, that's part of the purpose of your team meeting, is you're getting inspired by God about why you do what you do. And that's when you get to share that with your intimate team. But if you can get parts of the mission and distill it into a purpose statement, these things can be said and clearly repeated to a larger amount of people to bring them along with you. Is this making sense? So if the mission is this big beast thing that you feel inside of you for your mission, for why you do what you do, and you have this heart for teenage kids and for leadership growth and all these things, and you feel very deeply about it, then you take the inner people in your life and consistently bring that before them. But in terms of to the wider audience of the kids that are in youth, or if you're in church, your church, it's good to have a few really quick, easily to understand statements that can convey your mission in an easy, simple way. And I'll give an example of this that I've written down. Our church's mission is taken from Acts 2, which is when it says they met around the apostles' doctrine, they broke bread, they prayed, they were believing for the miraculous, they were in fellowship. All of these pillars, we would say, are the pillars of our church. And I used to bring these pillars all the time, and it was like it's a 30-minute preach. And then we've distilled those big pillars to know Jesus, discover purpose, receive miracles. And so every Sunday that's on our screens, and usually somebody within the service will allude to one of those. And so most people in our church, Trish can back me up, hopefully, most people in our church know our purpose statement is know Jesus, discover purpose, receive miracles. But what it allows us to do is that we are able to say, like for us, grace preaching is very pivotal, new creation teaching. So I say, hey, our purpose here is that we know Jesus. So we are always going to have systematic teaching on the new covenant. And then we say, we're believing that you're going to that everybody here is going to discover purpose. So this is how you discover your purpose. You get in a connect group, you get serving. So it allows you to bring cultural expressions and align people with purpose, so that when they think church, they think, oh, that's where I learn about Jesus. That's where I get some purpose and life from the church as well as my life. And we put in receive miracles, and that's the most divisive thing in our purpose statement because you would say it's not strictly a purpose statement. However, we want that to be something that's highly cultural in our church, that we believe for a miracle, that we're believing that we're people of faith. So that's probably the one that gets said the most. We say you're going to receive a miracle. So we're going to pray, we're going to believe. Now, the kids' purpose statement is know Jesus, make friends, change the world. Because the kids who are 12 and under aren't going to understand, discover purpose, receive miracles as much as the adults. So for them, what do we want from our kids' ministry is that they know Jesus, that they have a healthy connection with their friends, and that they have a sense that God's going to use their life so change the world. So that's the purpose statement. Now, if I put that onto, say, youth, I was just thinking about like, why do you have a youth camp? And some of the reasons that I've come up with, and hopefully, Beck, these are all right, is prolonged periods of encountering God. Um, we like to support our state youth camp because kids get real connections with God. They create friendships with other Christian kids from the same culture, the CRC, that they can create connection with the youth leaders as they go. And I've seen that it changes their lives, but it's very hard to say that to a large group of kids. Um, we need them to see Christianity as more than just a relatively small group of people that they see every week, right? So if I say that to the youth, they're not going to buy into that so much, but they will buy into at this place, you'll experience God, you'll make friends, and you'll have fun. So the messaging to get kids for the purpose of the youth camp is you're going to experience God, you're going to make heaps of friends, and it's fun because that is the purpose of it. But it's kind of really what you're saying is come expected to engage in meetings. I want you to go and connect with kids from other towns, and you're really going to enjoy this. So your purpose statement is trying to take the largeness of your mission and then put it into something that can be easily repeatable so that people have a sense of direction and that they've got purpose for coming to church. And so, what you're really saying is, if we say about a youth camp, you're going to experience God, make friends, and have fun, is we're saying we want you to engage. When you come into the service, you're going to engage. Now, all you're saying is experience God. But one of your core missional things is that kids will experience God and be changed. But we need something for them to grab onto that mission and purpose. And like the kids that invite their friends, we need them to think, hey, if I get my friends to this camp, they're going to find God, or God's going to find them, however theologically you want to put that. But yeah, so hopefully that's clear. Your mission is a big beastly thing that God speaks to you about that he's always adding layers to that can be quite complicated. It's quite hard to articulate, but you can get with your close team and you can be speaking about mission. You can be speaking about what's in your heart. It doesn't have to be honed. It can be raw and emotional and gathering. And those people, hopefully that group will grow, but you do need something to give everybody. So we say that's a purpose statement. It's a short, sharp list of things that are, it can be one statement. I reckon more than four, and you're going to be way too much. Does that make sense? Um, what is Hope Central's is communities of grace. Like that's so simple, but that's there. And you can, if you look at them, that's what they do. This is Church in Adelaide, CRC Church, is they set up churches that, and so that embodies. So when they say we're going to plant a church, everyone's like, yeah, we create communities of grace, right? So everybody's already going along with the purpose of the church. So what I want to do now is I've got some questions that we might have a few minutes. I don't know if anybody's got any questions for me with that. I always find on Zoom you could say things a lot better, but it's hard because you haven't got the interaction of the people. But if you've got any questions for me, this would be a good time. But I just want you to think for 5 or 10 minutes, because this is probably the starting block of all the other things that we're going to talk about, is was the ministry started? Why was your youth group started? What is the core calling on your ministry? Because if you say, oh, we're going to see heaps of kids saved, we're going to pastor heaps of kids, we're going to disciple heaps of kids, we're going to see blah, blah, blah. It's like that's a lot of core things, but maybe your number one thing is outreach. Maybe your number one thing is discipleship. And you can grow in all of those areas and hit all of them, but probably there's a journey there to get to that place in the ministry. And so you probably need to capitalize on the things that are your calling in ministry. And just ask yourself, be really honest, is what we're doing in line with that purpose? And how can we say our mission in a few words? That's going to be a longer question. I mean, it took us know Jesus, discover purpose, receive miracles is very simple and seems, but that actually took us maybe we're simple, but that took us ages to figure out. So is it cool to have a few minutes to just answer those questions?
Question. So, like with the mission thing, like your mission can still be like a bit defined too. Like, so
Yeah.
it can be a bit more lengthy, a bit more defined, but then your purpose is more like statementy, right? Is that
Yeah, your purposes statements kind of like it's kind of like the iceberg. So say you have your in your context, you have someone new come to what you're doing, and then they hear your purpose statement, and then they actually come to you and say, like, take me along the journey. And then it's good to have like your mission sort of definable as well, because some people want that deeper expression, but just to get people in, it needs to be shorter.
yeah? So, like, could your mission essentially kind of reflect like core values, or would that be
Yeah.
language like other language that might get used, or
Yeah, and
yeah,
it's sort of deeper. I think one of the things I wrote is your purpose needs to be understandable even for non-Christians.
yes,
It's like everyone understands your purpose, but not you kind of got to have inside knowledge and understanding to understand your mission because
yes,
it's
okay,
complex and
yeah.
Christian and
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So would you like say like if you're like church established and then you look like it's almost like your tagline is like,
yeah.
yeah, okay, cool, cool.
It is like a branding tagline, but it's kind of like more than advertising. It's trying to create culture that we're going to talk about next. Creating culture is a lot deeper than that, but it's kind of like the beginnings of this is the culture of where we're going. And it's kind of like a tool to keep things direct. It's a lot easier to develop your purpose statement. So just I would start with, even if you start with purpose, you could do it either way, but I would say a mission statement is really hard to write. But having certain, if you think about your mission and you get that out on paper is important, but supplying people with a mission statement is hard. But you have a mission, as in to find out your mission is like, why do I do it? Why do I do um, what I do? And again, your purpose statement is just a few core missional things that you have to bring people along on the journey. And you have a mission inside of you. That's why you're on this Zoom. That's why you're in mission in ministry. So thinking about that, why do I do what I do, is really important to know why, so that you can settle in yourself. And, when things are hard, what do you think? You know, is like that's your mission. That's what you find important. Does that make sense? So you can start just with the purpose statement. In fact, we probably did. Mission is like a fleshed out version of the purpose, but mission's huge. Somebody wanted to put in ours, what was it? Something about community, discover community, or something like that. It was find community or be in community, which I think is a really good one. It just made ours a bit long. So you can't fit everything in your purpose statement, is probably what I'm trying to say.
And like in regards to say like in a youth ministry or particularly like if you're running a ministry within like a church that obviously has its own, central mission. So say for example like in your church established, like your kids thing obviously fits in line with um that. So for like those of us here who particularly run like a set ministry within a church, like how important does what we do in terms of answering those questions fit into the wider church? Like we're not off running our own separate thing. That's, like our church mission might be to cultivate communities of grace, and we're here like with the mission to, I don't know, do something that's maybe quite different to that. I guess what would you say for that?
I would say all of a youth mission does fit within the church's mission, unless the church has a really, really niche mission. Does that make sense? And so I found it effective. We did this with the youth. Oh, it would have been 4 years ago. And what, Joe, where did it land? The youth one. No, Jesus, have fun. So they just simplified it down a lot. And I think that you can't diverge from the church's mission, but finding your mission and vision inside of that is really important, and you'll probably get more support that way as well. But also, it's just what God's doing with your church, so there's going to be more traction. Um, and so, yeah, I mean, we have a purpose statement. We're quite upfront with it. That's just the way we are. Your church probably has something similar. Um, but if not, talk to your pastor about the mission, and then that will make your mission even more clarified. And you might say, you might not go up to your pastor and say, what's your mission? What's our mission? But you might be able to say, like, why do you pastor the church? What do you see is the heart of the church? What's God doing in our church right now? What's your vision for the church? What's your dreams for the church? And I'm sure that there'll be an impartation from the Holy Spirit in that too. So it is actually a big thing that they say anything with more than one head's a monster. So you don't want to be creating more heads, right? You want to be coming under the covering of the church, which I'm sure everybody is. But yeah, does that answer the question at all?
Yeah, no, that's good. Like, I think that's, yeah, I think that's even a good step, as in, like, if you're not sure what the vision and mission of your church is, like, they're good conversations to have, like, even in
With your
answering those
pastor.
questions.
Youth groups' purpose and missions change naturally over time. I would say that our expression gets bigger, but the core mission, like the reason that youth was started, was to disciple our kids in outreach. And so that probably, the mission and purpose probably has stayed the same. It just kind of grows and sometimes shrinks. Doesn't change, but sometimes in a season, we can strain what it is. Sometimes you're consolidating. So I don't, that's probably the change that, um, that you see is like a change in vision. So sometimes you're like, oh, we got a vision to outreach into. Um, we had this vision when I was a youth leader that we had all of these kids being bussed in. Jody will remember, Jody. And so our vision was just like outreach to these kids, get them saved. But it was the same vision. It was the same mission, but our vision was to get these kids embedded in a local church. But it was still to that they know Jesus, have fun, you know? So I'd say the mission does stay the same, but your vision does change dramatically in different seasons. Does the mission change if someone else takes the ministry, or does the mission stay the same no matter who leads it? Look, I think just practically there will be little shifts in mission when there's different leadership. It's a hard question to answer, because if it's a youth group in a church, then it probably will come under the mission whole of the church, um, which is easier to do than I'm making it sound. But I would say that when there's leadership or a leadership team, um, it can change. Now, the goal, and this is, I don't want to sound too hard here, but the goal is that churches and ministries are healthy so that they have a robust culture, and so they don't have to change. But when something doesn't have a strong mission and culture, then sometimes when a leader comes in, they need to change the mission and culture. Because cultures do change, especially with leadership. But if there's been a church that has if you are coming into a youth ministry that's got a very robust mission and culture, it's actually not wise to change that, even if you don't align with everything, because that's the way that ship is going. Now, if it's got a bad mission and culture, then yeah, change it, right? But I doubt it does. Does that make sense? So, like, if a leader does come in who's got a very different missional direction to an old leader, that's always really choppy for the people. It's always a lot of change. People can get hurt. So I would say I try to change it as much as I can, or if you have to change the mission, change it slowly. If you do a big turn, then people go off. Like a ship's going one way, does a big turn. The bigger the ship, the more people get sent off at the side, right? So if it's a thing that's not really thriving, then you can change it quickly. But if not, I would be really slow. Our church was set up by my father, and we have the same mission verses that we use, but different vision statements a lot. We've changed some culture, and but the mission's pretty much identical. Yeah.
Changing that vision, mate. Was it? Did you had to do that a little bit slow too with your dad? I'm just, yeah.
Probably he changed vision over his time as well. Vision's always changing. So we came into different areas of growth in the church, so we had to change the vision. Does that make sense? And so the other thing is that, say, Dad and I have different giftings, so it's led to slightly different vision and culture, but same mission. But I'm not saying you can't change the mission of a thing. I'm just saying that if it's healthy, it probably doesn't need changing. This next bit, culture, this is probably my biggest learning experience. So, we've all heard how important culture is. I was like, oh, okay, but I didn't really understand what it was. Culture is are values that are held in an organization sort of subconsciously, and those values start to dictate behaviors. So, culture is what we see, hear, and feel in organization. It is our inherent behaviors that have been formed by deeply held values. People behave according to what they value and are motivated by. And that's the same in the church. So often I have conversations and they're like, oh, our people just don't insert. They're not this, they're not that. Well, what it usually is that there is no value of whatever that thing is. Oh, our people don't read their Bibles. They don't really interested in reading their Bibles. It's like, well, there's been no value placed on reading the word through the ministry. Our people don't pray. This is something that I've just been thinking about in my church. I'm like, oh, I need to spin the plate of the value of prayer because we have people who pray, but a culture of prayer, I feel like, just being honest, I need to be, because I believe in prayer, so I need to be being intentional to reinforce the value of prayer in our church. I'm very good at like everybody reads their Bible in my church, if I'm honest. We're quite, that's a high value of mine. So because I value it so much, I talk about it all the time. I get close to people, they buy a new Bible, they usually get on a Bible reading plan because that's my value personally. And so your good culture doesn't automatically happen. So I've written here, this is my biggest learning curve. Reinforcing values keeps culture strong. What we celebrate becomes our culture in a good sense, and what we tolerate we'll have more of in a bad sense. And this is the hard thing of leadership, the tolerate bit. But if you think about celebrating, when you're with your team or when you're on platform in ministry, whatever you show to have value, people eventually will value. So reading the word's an easy one. Don't tell people to read the word. tell them why you read the word. You know, the word of God's like this two-edged sword that just works out your emotions. It just gets into you and it just makes life easier and it feeds you. And I've never spent time with God and regretted it. And God speaks you to his word and he makes your soul so full and he just helps you get through your day. And then that people start to value reading the word, right? Or a big one is people say our people aren't very generous and they go, well, I'm going to teach on giving. I think you should teach on giving. That's true. I'm not against teaching on giving. We teach on giving. We're quite proactive teaching on giving, if I'm honest. But consistently sowing the seeds of God wants us to be generous. And the reason he wants us to be generous is because it leads to a better life. There's a value of generosity. So at our church, it's shout somebody at a coffee after church because it's generous God, generous life. We have a generous, that's actually a bit of a saying, generous God, so we have a generous life. Whatever value you reinforce eventually will become subconscious behaviors. The thing is that being direct and teaching people you have to give more will have fruit for a short time and create a lot of expectation and but if we show people in the word the joy of giving and it becomes a value, then the church becomes more generous, which not just in our tithes, but in the community, all of these things. So people start making meals for each other, all of these things that you want to happen within the body that are culturally good things don't happen spontaneously. And if they do, they don't maintain spontaneously. As a leader, you are a cultural expert. You know that you understand the culture of your church. So rather than saying, how can I instruct people to behave differently? Maybe start to think, how can I affect culture with what I'm celebrating? Um, and some of the ways that other church celebrate things are cliche, but they seem to work for them. So you don't have to do everything that we do or other churches do. I know a church that they celebrate the person that's brought the most people to church by bringing them up on stage and giving them a gift and saying, Sally here has brought 25 people to church this year. I find like that would be hard for me to do, but I know churches that do it and it creates people bring people to church, right? So that's a very overt way to celebrate that culture. But I think a lot of the time our thinking goes to how can I manage people? How can I instruct people to do better when culture eats problems? So we had I'm being very vulnerable tonight. We had a lot of people come over from another church one year, like 100 people, and that for our church was enough to affect the culture of the church. And so they were gossiping about the last church that was becoming part of our culture. So the leadership team, we put on a free dinner and invited everybody to be there, but especially new people. And in that dinner, we outlined our values and we really celebrated the value of we are grace people, so we are gracious, right? And didn't know if it would work, but I would say that that was maybe it was a word from the Lord that changed the culture of those people because very quickly that was an event that we did that allowed people to understand our values quickly. So we don't talk like I said, if you God um, we are grace people, so that makes us gracious. And if we are not gracious, then maybe the grace of God hasn't taken a hold in our lives. This is what I said. So if I find myself thinking ill of people and pulling them down, maybe I'm not understanding the grace of God, right? And that did make a big change in that group of people. And then we just worked to get them all in different connect groups as well. So that was another thing that we did. But whatever you celebrate, you'll get more of. You'll get that that'll reinforce your whatever you celebrate will become your culture. And whatever you tolerate, you'll get more of. So if there is especially a leader doing something and you go, oh, that's all right, then you'll just get more of that over time because that will be seen as the cultural value norm. And the unfortunate part of leadership is when you invite people up to be in leadership with you, essentially what you're saying is, I will speak into what you're doing because I really, really care about our people. So I care about the values that are expressed. And that is the price of leadership of those conversations. But just be upfront, be honest early to say, hey, if you come into the leadership, we will have conversations about what are our values. Does that make sense? Um, but if you don't be upfront and then you have to confront somebody, it's really hard. But if you've said to people, we're just going to have this constant relationship where we say, we'll talk about things because I love you, you're in our leadership, and we believe in you, then it makes those conversations easier. This won't happen organically. It needs to be systemized. Create a schedule to bring people into proximity with you so you can impart culture. You will see growth in your people. There was a time in, I've said this a lot, but there was a time in the church that Jody and I grew up in Narandra where they had like this church planting explosion. They just had this amazing culture of church planting, and so I've asked Trev about it. I even asked David Wright about it. I asked Dad about it. Um, and what I figured was they had really close proximity to each other because they were all about the same age. And probably in the 80s, there was a bit more hanging out going on in churches than there are. Our time is sort of spent a little differently. And what I realized is they developed each other in values. They all have the same set of values, all these pastors that we sort of grew up under these pastors. So they all had these same values that were shared. So what I took away from that is if you want people to get on, if you need cultural champions, people who are going to embody the culture like you do. So if you get them close to you often, and we do this through discipleship groups, but also just practically, if you get one or two cultural champions, you can change a culture. You can make a culture really robust. That's how you make it longer and stronger. They understand the purpose, they understand the mission, and because they get close to you, they start to understand and adopt some of the values that you have. And these values start to become the behaviors of and the culture, like becomes the feeling of the ministry is these things. So I would say, and the questions here is like, who are you bringing closer to make a cultural champion with you? You don't need many people. Say, I don't have many people. It's like if you have one, you can double yourself, or double your influence in culture because skills are really easy to impart and God can make them happen overnight. But attitudes and values take time and are really important and a lot harder to find in people. So I gravitate 100% more towards people who have the same values of us than people who are gifted. Even in preaching, and our preaching, there's actually some pretty gifted people in our church who don't preach because they're not got the same values. But um, I will always put people up on stage who have the same values and who will encourage people. So whatever you focus on will dictate the behaviors of the organization you have. This will this will be the continual assessment of the leader or the leadership group is how is our culture, not looking down on it, but like what are we promoting? What are we celebrating? What are we bringing closer? How are we making people more like the culture by what we're celebrating, not by dictating behaviors? Do we exhibit our purpose through our behavior? And if we don't express, if we're not, if our behavior doesn't line up with our purpose, then I need to change some cultural things. I need to change some values that people have. One of them is servanthood. If your leaders are not helping you pack up, leaving early, not always being on time, that's values. And you can instruct, and it becomes a thing they hate to do, right? We've all been in workplaces where you get in a team meeting and they just rip you apart, and that doesn't change anybody. It might change them for a week. Whereas if you can impart values, about like that's where your purpose comes in. It's like, hey, the kids are coming in. We want them to know Jesus and have fun. And so we are got this opportunity to be organized so that we can show them that we care for them, so that we can be there and be in the moment with them. And we're all studied up, we're all prayed up because we're believing that God's going to touch them. You're actually talking purpose, but you're reinforcing culture because stewardship's a big part of ministry, right? It's a huge part. So you want to be reinforcing that. And we do that on Sunday mornings at church with a huddle before church. Um, we're running out of time, but I'll say this last thing is that Joe and I noticed that no one from our church was talking to new people. And so it was our objective. We get different people to run the prayer meeting. All of our people come in for a 5 minute prayer meeting, but really it's a together moment more than it's praying for the service. And for a few weeks in the prayer meeting was like, hey, there's going to be new people come in. Our church is really friendly. Someone said of our church that everybody's always glad to see you. Why can we show people that we're glad to see them? That's part of our objective today. And within about 2 or 3 weeks, it just took 2 or 3 weeks, I noticed that the new people couldn't leave the auditorium. Now, we already had that culture from my parents, but it had lapsed. So rather than asking people, can you make sure you connect with new people, tried to throw out to the whole church by doing it through our teams, right? So over a 3 week period, you got to a lot of people like, hey, this is what we do. We love welcoming new people. One of the values of our church is that we are friendly, just simpleness. We're happy and friendly. And so that is the job of the leader is to be saying, like, are we moving in our purpose? Does that make sense? That I would say that's my biggest leadership lesson. So the questions we have are, what am I celebrating? Do I know the cultural values? Do I know them? These are very simple things that they're big words, but if your culture is like friendliness, happiness, that they're happy, that they have fun, that there's an atmosphere of acceptance, that they have an atmosphere of receiving from God, these are just values. I have an atmosphere of prayer. They're just very simple values. They don't have to be complicated, but if we don't know them, we won't celebrate them. We will celebrate what's really important to us, and everyone will start looking like us, and that's a good thing. But if we're a bit more strategic to say, can I think about what values do we want to see in our people? What do we want to see in our organization, in my ministry? What do we want it to look like? What do we want it to feel like? Um, and sometimes you're going to go like, oh wow, I stopped celebrating that and it's dropped off. That's okay. Just spend the next couple of times celebrating, reinforcing it positively is what I mean by celebrating. Just bringing it in a positive way rather than trying to dictate how people act. Look, guys, if you could just find a new person and greet them, that would be great. No one wants to hear that, but everybody doesn't mind hearing, hey, our culture here is that we are friendly. We're known for it. We're famous for being friendly. Um, do I look for people around me and who am I bringing closer so that as leaders, you're creating cultural champions? Do my systems create or distract from relationship? Because you have to, what I mean by that is, are we so busy that we don't bring people close? Are we so caught up in what we're doing that we have forgotten that replicating myself is the most important part of my leadership? Things function is important, but that I replicate myself is the most important. So every person should be thinking, who have I got close to me? Because you celebrating something is going to make culture, but your team celebrating something is going to create hyperculture. Does that make sense? So who am I bringing with me? The last thing, because we've got 3 minutes, sorry, Beck. We were going to talk about that a bit more, but I've rabbited on. Without vision, things drift and lose focus. Presenting goals with real outcomes attached keeps everybody moving in the same direction. So the question for vision is, what am I aiming at? Because if you've got 15 kids coming to youth and you've got a vision for more, Well, you won't move towards creating a system for 30 kids a week if you're just going to go, well, we've got 15. So creating the vision to say, hey guys, we're believing for 30 kids per week because we're going to reach 15 kids this term. Then you start to say, well, we probably don't have enough youth leaders. So I'm going to have to try and raise up some youth leaders. I'm going to have to, our pizza budget's going to have to get bigger. So all of these thought processes and vision drive you towards the vision because you start to prepare, and preparation is probably the greatest expression of faith. So when God sees you preparing, then he often blesses that. So vision is where we show others and we show God that we have faith that he's going to do something.